When Jessica Morgan spent her last $200 on an abandoned missile silo at a rural county auction, it was a desperate gamble to provide shelter for herself and her 8-year-old son after a devastating layoff and looming eviction. She never imagined that beneath the rusted metal and decades of dust, she would discover a hidden underground facility containing classified Cold War files that revealed a covert CIA mind control program tested on unwitting American citizens, a discovery that would make her the target of government operatives, thrust her into a high-stakes battle for governmental transparency, and ultimately lead to Senate intelligence hearings that would forever change how America's spy agencies are allowed to operate on U.S. soil. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The letter came on a rainy Thursday morning, sandwiched between a cell phone bill and a supermarket flyer, as if its life-altering contents were just another piece of everyday mail. Notice of eviction, 14 days to vacate. Jessica Morgan stared at the bold black letters, feeling the ground shift beneath her feet as she stood in the small kitchenette of her one-bedroom apartment. Through the thin walls, she could hear her 8-year-old son Lucas laughing at cartoons, blissfully unaware that their world was collapsing. Again. "No, no, no," Jessica whispered, scanning the document for any possible loophole. There wasn't. The building had been sold to developers planning luxury condominiums. All tenants had 14 days to find new housing. No exceptions, no extensions. At 34, Jessica hadn't imagined she would be here, a single mother with a master's degree in environmental engineering, newly unemployed after her consulting firm lost their major government contract, and now facing homelessness in a rental market that seemed designed to exclude people exactly like her. She set the eviction notice on the counter and took a deep breath, mentally calculating their options. Her savings had dwindled to just under $300 after 3 months of unemployment. Her parents lived across the country and were barely making ends meet themselves. Friends had already helped as much as they could during the initial weeks after her layoff. "Mom, come see this robot I built," Lucas called from the living room, his voice bright with the innocence of childhood. Jessica quickly wiped away a tear before stepping out of the kitchen with a forced smile. "That's amazing, buddy," she said, admiring the creation he'd fashioned from recycled materials, a skill he'd inherited from her engineering mindset. Lucas had always been remarkably resourceful, making treasures from what others discarded, a quality that might serve them well in the days ahead. "When I grow up, I want to build robots that help people," Lucas declared, adjusting a small solar panel he'd salvaged from a broken calculator, like ones that build houses for people who don't have them. Jessica's heart twisted. How could she tell him they might soon be among those people? That night, after Lucas was asleep, Jessica opened her laptop and began the desperate search for affordable housing. The numbers on the screen mocked her. Studio apartments rented for nearly twice what she currently paid for their one-bedroom. Application fees alone would quickly deplete what remained of her savings, and every listing demanded proof of income. 3 times the monthly rent, impossible on unemployment benefits that barely covered groceries. She expanded her search radius, looking at towns farther from Lucas's school, places with longer commutes to potential jobs, areas with higher crime rates, anywhere that might have something, anything they could afford. Each option seemed worse than the last. By 2 a.m., desperation drove her to search county auction listings, tax-foreclosed properties, abandoned buildings, distressed real estate the county was selling to recoup unpaid taxes. Most were dilapidated houses, requiring massive renovations or vacant lots in remote areas. And then she saw it. Former military property, missile silo, minimum bid $100, sold as is. Jessica almost scrolled past it. What would she do with an abandoned missile silo? But something made her click on the listing. There were only 3 photos: a concrete entrance partially obscured by overgrowth, a rusty metal door, and an aerial view showing a small rectangular structure surrounded by 5 acres of wild grassland. The description was sparse. Decommissioned. Atlas F missile silo facility, stripped of military equipment in 1965. 15,000 SQFT underground space. Surface structure approximately 500 SQFT, rural location 30 miles from Pine Ridge. No utilities connected. Significant renovation required. Property sold as is. Jessica's exhausted mind began to spin with improbable possibilities. Underground. Space meant potential living quarters that would be naturally insulated. The surface building could perhaps be converted into something habitable more quickly. 5 acres of land offered opportunities for gardens, maybe even small-scale farming. Eventually, it was insane. She was an environmental engineer, not a construction expert or survivalist. The property was 30 miles from town, far from Lucas's school and potential employment opportunities. And yet, what if this was their only option? What if $100, or whatever the final bid might be, was the price of never having to worry about a landlord's whims again? Jessica checked the auction date. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. at the county courthouse. This is completely crazy, she told herself, closing the laptop. But as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the upstairs neighbor's footsteps, the idea refused to fade. By morning, what had seemed like midnight madness had crystallized into their best, perhaps only option for housing security. Jessica called her former colleague Diane, who agreed to watch Lucas for the day. She withdrew $250 from the bank, nearly everything she had left, and drove her aging Toyota Corolla to the county courthouse, rehearsing arguments to convince herself this wasn't the most desperate gamble of her life. Preparing and narrating. This story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The county courthouse was a weathered stone building with wide steps leading to heavy wooden doors. Jessica arrived, 30 minutes early, clutching her bidder registration papers and trying to look more confident than she felt. The auction room was already half filled with people in business attire, real estate investors and developers who did this professionally. "First time?" asked an older man with kind eyes, noticing her nervous fidgeting with the bidding paddle. Jessica nodded. "That obvious?" "We all start somewhere," he said, introducing himself as Frank Delgado. "Been coming to these for 30 years. Looking for anything specific today?" "Actually, yes," Jessica admitted. "The old missile silo property." Frank's eyebrows rose. "Interesting choice. Those military conversions can be challenging, but they're built to last. What are you planning to do with it?" "Live in it," Jessica said, then added quickly, "eventually. Convert the surface building first, then gradually work on the underground spaces." Instead of laughing, Frank nodded thoughtfully. "Makes more sense than you might think. Those facilities have excellent bones, concrete and steel that would cost millions to build today. The hard part is utilities and making it livable, but if you've got the skills and time." He trailed off, studying her. "I'm an environmental engineer," Jessica said, "or was until my firm downsized. I know it's unconventional, but—" "Unconventional is how innovation happens," Frank interrupted. "And between us, I doubt you'll have much competition for that property. Most developers want quick flips in urban areas, not long-term projects in the middle of nowhere." Frank's prediction proved accurate. When Lot 23, former Atlas F missile silo, came up for auction, the room remained quiet after the auctioneer announced the minimum bid of $100. Jessica raised her paddle, heart hammering in her chest. $100, From bidder number 17, the auctioneer announced. Do I hear 150? A man in the back casually raised his paddle. $150 from bidder number 42. Do I hear $200? Jessica raised her paddle again, silently calculating how much she could afford. To go, not much higher. $200 from bidder number 17. Do I hear $250? The room remained silent. Jessica held her breath. $200 going once, going twice. The auctioneer scanned the room. Sold to bidder number 17 for $200. The sharp crack of the gavel made Jessica jump. Had that really just happened? Had she actually purchased a missile silo for less than the security deposit on most apartments? The next hour passed in a blur of paperwork, signatures, and transaction processing. The county clerk explained that the property had been abandoned for decades, with property taxes unpaid since the 1990s, when the last owner, a doomsday prepper, had apparently given up on his bunker dreams. You'll need to file for change of use permits if you're planning to live there, the clerk advised. And there might be environmental assessments needed. These old military sites sometimes have contamination issues. By noon, Jessica Morgan, single mother, unemployed environmental engineer, and now owner of a decommissioned Atlas F missile silo, clutched a set of keys and property deed in hands that wouldn't stop trembling. "Congratulations," Frank said, finding her in the courthouse hallway. "That's quite an adventure you're embarking on." "I'm still not sure if I'm brilliant or desperate," Jessica admitted. "Sometimes those qualities are two sides of the same coin," Frank replied with a wink. "Here's my card. I've done some unusual renovations over the years, including a converted grain silo. Call me if you need advice or contractor recommendations." Jessica thanked him and headed directly to her car. She couldn't wait to see her property, up close. One quick call to Diane confirmed Lucas was happily engaged in building a Lego masterpiece and wouldn't miss her for a few more hours. The drive took her through increasingly rural landscapes, past farms and forests, until she turned onto a narrow gravel road that wound through tall grass. Her GPS announced, arriving at destination, beside what looked like an overgrown hiking trail. Jessica parked and checked the property map from the auction documents. Sure enough, she needed to follow this path about a quarter-mile to reach the silo entrance. Grabbing her phone and keys, she started walking, pushing through waist-high prairie grass dotted with wildflowers. After about 5 minutes, the landscape opened to reveal a small clearing where a concrete structure emerged from the earth like an ancient monument. The rectangular building, what had once been the entrance to the missile facility, was approximately the size of a small garage, with metal doors secured by heavy chains and padlocks. Surrounding the entrance, barely visible beneath years of overgrowth, was a large concrete pad that likely covered the main silo shaft. The entire area was encircled by a rusted chain-link fence with warning signs still partially legible. U.S. government property, unauthorized entry prohibited. Jessica stood at the fence, taking in her new property with a mixture of awe and trepidation. What had seemed like desperate madness last night, and a calculated risk this morning now, felt like either the most brilliant or the most foolish decision of her life. She had just spent her last $200 on a Cold War relic in the middle of nowhere, a concrete bunker that had once housed weapons capable of unspeakable destruction. Now her best hope for providing a stable home for her son. Using the key from the auction, Jessica unlocked the gate and approached the entrance building. The heavy chains required some wrestling, but eventually gave way, allowing her to pull open one of the metal doors with a cinematic creak that sent shivers down her spine. The smell hit her first, the distinctive scent of a long-abandoned space, musty and metallic. Dust particles danced in the shafts of sunlight penetrating through the doorway, illuminating a small antechamber with concrete walls and a massive circular hatch in the floor. Using her phone's flashlight, Jessica examined the space more carefully. What had once been a security checkpoint contained only remnants of its military past. Empty equipment mounts on the walls, disconnected electrical conduits, and faded hazard markings on the floor. The circular hatch, approximately 5 feet in diameter, appeared to be sealed shut with a heavy mechanical wheel lock, similar to those on bank vaults or submarine doors. It looked impossibly heavy, and Jessica doubted she could open it alone. On the far wall, however, she discovered a standard door she hadn't initially noticed. It was locked, but one of the smaller keys on her ring fit perfectly. Behind it, a narrow concrete stairwell spiraled downward into darkness. "Well, Morgan," she whispered to herself, "you wanted affordable housing. Let's see what $200 bought you." Jessica descended cautiously, counting the steps as an engineer's habit. At 43 steps, the stairwell opened into what must have been the facility's main control level, a cavernous concrete room approximately 50 feet square with ceilings at least 15 feet high. Unlike the stripped entrance, this level contained abandoned furniture and equipment, metal desks bolted to the floor, empty filing cabinets, remnants of control panels with cut wires, and heavy-duty shelving units lining the walls. Adjacent, rooms branched off from the main space, what appeared to be dormitory facilities with built-in metal bunks, bathroom facilities with industrial fixtures, a kitchen area with stainless steel counters, and several smaller rooms that might have been offices or storage. The space was intimidating in its scale and stark utilitarian design, but Jessica's trained eye saw past the dust and abandonment to the structural possibilities. The concrete walls would provide excellent insulation. The built-in systems for air circulation, water and power distribution, though currently disconnected, could potentially be restored or adapted. Most importantly, the facility was sound. Despite decades of abandonment, the concrete showed minimal cracking, the metal structures no significant corrosion. The military had built this facility to withstand nuclear attack. It had easily weathered mere neglect. As Jessica continued exploring the main level, something caught her attention, a door different from the others. While most entryways in the facility were standard military issue with clear labeling, this one was unmarked and secured with a more sophisticated locking mechanism than the simple key locks elsewhere. Jessica examined it carefully, noting that unlike the aged patina on other doors, this lock appeared newer, possibly installed years after the facility's decommissioning. Intrigued, she tried each key from her ring, but none fit. She was about to move on when she noticed something odd about the adjacent wall section. The concrete texture didn't quite match the surrounding area. Pressing her hands against different sections of the wall, she felt a slight give in one spot. "No way," she whispered, applying more pressure. To her astonishment, a section of the wall pivoted inward, revealing a hidden compartment containing a small metal box. Inside was a single key, newer than the others, with no military markings. Jessica stared at it, then at the locked door, a chill running down her spine despite the stuffy air. This wasn't standard military design. Someone had created this hidden compartment after the facility was decommissioned. With a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, Jessica tried the key in the unmarked door. It turned smoothly, the lock releasing with a solid click. The door swung open to reveal a room unlike any other in the facility. While the rest of the silo had been stripped of sensitive equipment, this room appeared intact, and it wasn't standard missile silo equipment. The space, approximately 15 by 15 feet, contained what looked like medical equipment, an examination table with restraints, monitoring devices of unusual design, and an array of filing cabinets lining one wall. A large, outdated computer system occupied another wall, its components covered in dust, but seemingly untouched otherwise. On a central desk sat a logbook bound in faded red leather, alongside a stack of film canisters and what appeared to be recording equipment from the 1970s. Jessica approached cautiously, her mind racing to make sense of what she was seeing. This wasn't part of the missile operations. This room had been repurposed after the military abandoned the site, converted into some kind of research or medical facility that someone had gone to great lengths to conceal. With trembling hands, she opened the logbook. The first entry, dated April 12, 1967, began, "Subject 01 responded well to initial stimulus. Cognitive restructuring proceeding according to protocol. Project Mindshaper showing promising preliminary results." Jessica flipped through more pages, her unease growing with each entry. The logs documented what appeared to be psychological experiments conducted on individuals referred to only by numbers. Many entries mentioned cognitive reprogramming, memory suppression techniques, and behavioral modification protocols. One entry from 1972 particularly disturbed her. Subject Z1 continues to resist standard methods, recommended for enhanced procedures following director approval. Note, subject's connection to regional press makes clean termination problematic if protocols fail. Setting down the logbook, Jessica turned to the filing cabinets. Most were locked, but one drawer had been left partially open. Inside were folders containing photographs, medical charts, and what appeared to be psychological assessments of individuals, real people with names, occupations, and personal histories, though their names had been redacted with black marker. The photographs showed men and women in various states of distress, some attached to monitoring equipment similar to what remained in the room. Many images documented physical reactions to what the accompanying notes called chemical enhancements to suggestibility. Jessica felt physically ill. She had purchased this property expecting Cold War military infrastructure. Instead, she'd found evidence of what appeared to be unauthorized human experimentation, possibly conducted by government agencies, possibly by someone who had acquired the abandoned facility for their own purposes. A noise from above, the distant sound of metal scraping against concrete, snapped Jessica back to the present. Someone was at the entrance. Quickly, she used her phone to photograph several pages of the logbook and a few of the most damning documents from the open filing cabinet. Then she carefully returned everything to its original position, slipped out of the room, locked the door behind her, and replaced the key in its hidden compartment. Heart pounding, she moved quickly toward the stairwell, only to hear footsteps descending. Jessica ducked into one of the dormitory rooms, pressing herself against the wall beside the door. "Ms. Morgan, are you down here?" A man's voice called out. "County Services. Just checking that everything's okay. Your car's still up top." Relief flooded through her. "Yes, I'm here," she called back, stepping into the main room. "Just exploring my new property." The man, middle-aged with a county services badge, smiled. "Quite a purchase you made. We like to check on new owners of these unusual properties, make sure they haven't gotten lost or injured. These old facilities can be hazardous." "I appreciate that," Jessica said, trying to appear normal despite her racing thoughts. "I was just finishing up, actually." "Find anything interesting?" he asked, his eyes scanning the room with what seemed like more than casual interest. "Just concrete and dust," Jessica replied with a forced laugh. "The military certainly stripped it thoroughly before abandoning it." The man nodded, but something in his expression made Jessica uneasy. "Well, I won't keep you. Just wanted to make sure you were safe. That Toyota yours up top looked like it might be having some trouble. Fluid under the engine." Jessica frowned. Her car had been running perfectly. "I'll check it out, thanks." As they climbed the stairs together, the man made casual conversation about the property's history, mentioning nothing about any post-military use. At the entrance, he handed her a card. Call if you need anything. County Services tries to help with these unusual properties. After he drove away, Jessica checked under her car. There was no fluid leak. On the drive back to town, her mind raced with questions. What had she really discovered? Who had used the facility after the military abandoned it? And was the county services man really who he claimed to be? More pressingly, what should she do with this information? She had bought this property to solve a housing crisis, not to stumble into what appeared to be evidence of illegal government. Experimentation. By the time she picked up Lucas from Diane's house, Jessica had made one decision. She would not tell anyone about the hidden room until she understood more about what she had found. The silo could still be their solution to homelessness, but the discovery complicated everything in ways she couldn't yet fully comprehend. "How was your day, Mom?" Lucas asked as they drove home. Jessica hesitated, then made another decision. "Actually, I did something pretty big today, something that might sound crazy at first." Lucas looked at her with curious eyes. "What kind of crazy?" "I bought us a new place to live. It's very different from our apartment. Actually, it's an old missile silo that the military used to use a long time ago." Lucas's eyes widened. "A real missile silo, like with nuclear missiles and stuff?" "The missiles are long gone," Jessica assured him. "But it's a huge underground facility with lots of rooms and space. It needs work, but it could be an amazing home eventually." Instead of showing concern, Lucas's face lit up with excitement. "That's the coolest thing ever. Will I get to pick my own room? Can I make a science lab down there? Will my friends be able to visit once we fix it up?" Jessica laughed, relief washing over her. "Yes, to all of that eventually. We'll start by making one section livable and then expand as we can." As they packed essentials that night, preparing for their first overnight visit to the silo the following day, Jessica's phone pinged with an email notification. The sender was unfamiliar. J. Wilcox, redacted, Gov. The message was brief. "Regarding your purchase of the former Atlas F facility, we should talk. Some things were left behind that may be of interest to national security. Please call 202-555-0147 at your earliest convenience." Jessica stared at the message, a chill running through her. How had they contacted her so quickly? How did they know what she had found? As Lucas cheerfully sorted which of his books and toys would come to their super-cool missile home first, Jessica realized their housing solution had just become infinitely more complicated. What had begun as a desperate bid for shelter had now entangled them in something far beyond real estate, something that had the attention of people who operated in shadows and spoke the language of national security. And yet, despite the fear now mingling with her uncertainty, Jessica felt a strange new resolve forming. This abandoned silo wasn't just shelter, it was leverage. Whatever she had discovered in that hidden room, someone wanted it badly enough to contact her within hours of her finding it. For a woman who had felt powerless against eviction notices and an unforgiving housing market, this new dynamic, as dangerous as it might be, offered something she hadn't felt in months, a position of strength. Tomorrow, they would move into their unconventional new home, and then Jessica Morgan would begin to unravel exactly what kind of secret she had purchased for $200 and how it might be used to secure not just housing, but a future for her son that no one could threaten to take away. The first night in their new underground home arrived faster than Jessica had anticipated. After her disturbing discovery and the mysterious email, she'd spent hours researching Atlas F missile silos, hoping to understand if the hidden medical room was standard in these facilities. It wasn't. According to declassified documents, these silos were designed solely for weapons systems and crew support, nothing resembling the concealed laboratory she'd found. "Mom, are we really going To sleep underground like moles? Lucas asked, his backpack stuffed with his most treasured possessions: dinosaur books, a solar-powered robot kit, and the star projector they used for their nightly astronomy lessons. Just like moles, Jessica confirmed, loading their car with sleeping bags, battery-powered lanterns, a portable camp stove, and containers of water. But much more high-tech. Think of it as our secret headquarters. This framing delighted Lucas, who immediately began planning how they would convert the facility into a science and exploration base where he could conduct experiments and build inventions. His enthusiasm was infectious, momentarily allowing Jessica to set aside her concerns about what they had truly purchased. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the prairie as they arrived at the silo property. Jessica had brought additional tools: bolt cutters, a battery-powered drill, basic plumbing supplies, anticipating the challenges of making even one section temporarily habitable. "Whoa!" Lucas exclaimed as they approached the entrance structure. "This is way cooler than our apartment." Jessica smiled despite her apprehension. "It's certainly different. And it's ours. No landlord can make us leave." This simple statement carried profound weight. Throughout Lucas's life, economic instability had forced them to move 4 times, each relocation disrupting his schooling and friendships. The thought of providing him lasting stability, however unconventional, strengthened Jessica's resolve. To make this work, mysterious hidden rooms and government emails notwithstanding, together they carried their supplies into the entrance building. Jessica had decided they would set up their temporary living space in what had been the facility's crew quarters, a room with built-in metal bunks that was closest to the bathroom facilities and kitchen area. Though utilities weren't connected, the underground temperature remained a constant 55 degrees, cool but manageable with sleeping bags and layers. "Can we explore everything?" Lucas asked, his flashlight beam dancing across the concrete walls as they descended the stairs. "Not tonight," Jessica replied carefully. "Some areas need to be checked for safety first. Tonight we'll just get our sleeping area set up and maybe explore the main control room." She had already decided to keep Lucas away from the hidden medical room until she better understood what they were dealing with. As they arranged their makeshift camp in the crew quarters, Lucas bubbled with questions and observations. "The air feels different down here, like it's heavier, and listen to how my voice echoes. Mom, this place is like a science museum we can live in." His perspective transformed what many would see as a cold, forbidding concrete bunker into a wonderland of possibility. Jessica found herself viewing their surroundings through his eyes, seeing not just the challenges, but the potential. After setting up their sleeping area, they explored the main control room, where Lucas immediately began identifying purposes for each abandoned console and empty equipment rack. "This could be my invention station," he declared, pointing to a metal workbench. "And that big area could be our greenhouse with special lights so plants can grow underground. And we could collect rainwater from the top and have it come down through pipes." Jessica marveled at his adaptability and vision. While she'd been calculating logistics and worrying about hidden dangers, Lucas was already mentally transforming their nuclear bunker into a sustainable underground home. As night fell above ground, the darkness within the silo became absolute, except for their lanterns. After a simple dinner heated on the camp stove, they sat on their sleeping bags, and Jessica continued their tradition of reading before bedtime, her voice echoing slightly in the concrete chamber. "Different kind of bedtime tonight, huh?" Jessica asked as she tucked Lucas into his sleeping bag on one of the metal bunks. "It's the best bedroom ever," he declared sleepily, "like sleeping in a secret base from my books." After Lucas fell asleep, Jessica sat in the dim light of a single lantern, reviewing the photos she'd taken of the documents in the hidden room. The clinical language describing subjects and procedures disturbed her deeply. These weren't military records, but appeared to be documentation of unauthorized experiments conducted on unwitting civilians. Experiments related to something called Project Mindshaper. One photo showed a page with a partial list of names, individuals selected for the program based on their proximity to information channels and influence potential. Though most information was redacted, several entries mentioned occupations, journalists, local government officials, university professors, and community organizers. The implication was chilling. This wasn't random experimentation, but targeted manipulation of individuals with specific roles in society, people who shaped public opinion or had access to information channels. Another document, dated 1974, referenced successful integration of modified subjects into target communities and continued monitoring via established networks. The final line was particularly disturbing. Containment protocols established for subjects showing memory recovery or behavioral regression. Jessica's exhaustion eventually overcame her unease, and she fell into a restless sleep filled with dreams of hidden rooms and faceless figures taking notes as she tried to escape an examination table. Morning in the silo arrived without the usual cues of sunlight or birdsong, only the gentle beeping of Jessica's watch alarm at 7 a.m. Lucas, surprisingly, had slept soundly and woke with renewed enthusiasm for exploring their underground domain. After a breakfast of granola bars and fruit, Jessica made a decision. They would spend the morning assessing what would be needed to make a portion of the silo truly livable: water, power, proper ventilation, before returning to their apartment to continue packing. With only 12 days remaining before their eviction, establishing basic habitability was the priority. "Can I explore while you do grown-up stuff?" Lucas asked, already mapping out which corridors he wanted to investigate. "We stick together down here," Jessica insisted, remembering the hidden room she wanted to keep him away from. "But you can be my official exploration assistant. I need someone with sharp eyes to help spot important details." This role pleased Lucas, who took to it with scientific seriousness, noting water pipes, electrical conduits, and ventilation shafts as they systematically mapped the main level. Jessica was impressed by the facility's self-contained design. Though disconnected, the silo had its own water system, likely tapping into an underground aquifer, septic system, air filtration, and backup generators. With her environmental engineering background, she understood the principles behind these systems and began formulating a plan to restore basic functionality. The most urgent needs were clear: electricity for lighting and essential equipment, running water for drinking and sanitation, and verified air quality throughout the living spaces. With her limited funds, Jessica would need to prioritize ruthlessly and handle as much of the work herself as possible. By midday, they had explored most of the main level, avoiding only the corridor leading to the hidden medical facility. Jessica had created detailed notes and diagrams, identifying what systems could be restored quickly and which would require professional assistance. "Time to head back to the apartment," she told Lucas, who protested immediately. "But we just got started. There's still the whole bottom level we haven't seen." "We have plenty of time for that," Jessica assured him. "This is going to be our home for a long time. We don't need to see everything on day one." As they gathered their belongings, Jessica's phone, which had no service underground, pinged as they reached the entrance level, multiple notifications arriving simultaneously. 3 missed calls from the number in the government email and a new message. "Ms. Morgan, it is imperative we discuss your purchase. Please contact us immediately regarding sensitive materials at the site." Jessica stared at the message, her unease deepening. There was also a missed call from an unknown local number and a voicemail. She played it as they loaded the car. "Ms. Morgan, this is Frank Delgado from the auction. I've been thinking about your silo project and have some equipment that might help with your renovation. Water pumps, generators, that sort of thing. I'm retiring and downsizing my workshop. They're yours if you want them. Give me a call." This unexpected kindness momentarily lifted Jessica's spirits. As they drove back toward town, she called Frank, arranging to see the equipment that afternoon. "Lucas, slight change of plans. We're going to visit Mr. Delgado to look at some equipment for the silo. Cool, like special underground science equipment. More like practical things to help us have electricity and water," Jessica explained, deliberately taking a different route back to town than usual, watching her rearview mirror for any signs of being followed. Frank's workshop turned out to be a sprawling property outside town with several large outbuildings filled with tools, equipment, and building materials. A lifetime of construction and renovation projects had left him with an impressive collection that he was indeed in the process of downsizing. "My kids aren't interested in any of this," Frank explained as he showed them around. "They're all city people with desk jobs. Seems a waste to sell it piece by piece when someone like you could put it to good use." The equipment was a treasure trove for their needs. A diesel generator in excellent condition, solar panels from an abandoned eco-housing project, water pumps, filtration systems, basic plumbing fixtures, and electrical supplies. "Mr. Delgado, this is incredibly generous," Jessica said, overwhelmed by the offering. "But I can't possibly afford—" "Did I mention a price?" Frank interrupted with a wink to Lucas. "Consider it an investment in an interesting project. All I ask is that you let me visit occasionally to see your progress. These old military conversions fascinate me." While Lucas explored a collection of scientific equipment Frank had salvaged from a closed high school, the older man drew Jessica aside. "There's something else you should know," he said quietly. "After you left the auction, some men were asking about who purchased the silo property. Not county officials, different type altogether, dark suits, government vehicles." Jessica's pulse quickened. What did they want to know? Everything about you, who you were, contact information, what you planned to do with the property. The auction office wouldn't give out your details, but they seemed very interested, thought you should be aware. "Thank you," Jessica said, her mind racing. "Any idea who they were?" Frank shrugged. "They had that federal look, the kind of men who flash badges but don't leave business cards. Been around long enough to recognize the type. Whatever's in that silo, someone cares about it." This confirmation of outside interest only strengthened Jessica's determination to understand exactly what she had purchased and what leverage it might provide. As they loaded the generator and initial supplies into Frank's truck, which he insisted on loaning them until you're properly set up, Jessica made another decision. Rather than returning to their apartment, they would spend another night at the silo. She needed to investigate further before responding to the government message, and the silo, ironically, felt safer than their apartment where they could be easily found. After a supply run for additional food, batteries, and necessities, they returned to the silo by late afternoon. Frank helped them unload the generator and basic equipment, looking around the entrance facility with professional interest. "Solid construction," he noted. "They built these places to last centuries. With your engineering background, you could create something remarkable here." Before leaving, he handed Jessica a satellite phone. "Cell service out here is spotty at best. This works anywhere. My number's programmed in if you need anything." With Frank's departure, Jessica and Lucas returned underground, this time better equipped for an extended stay. Jessica set up the generator near an air shaft, carefully venting the exhaust outward while running heavy-duty extension cords to their living area. For the first time, electric lights illuminated the main control room, transforming it from a shadowy cavern to a space with genuine potential. Lucas celebrated this advancement by immediately setting up his science station at one of the metal desks, arranging his books and portable microscope with meticulous care. "Now it's starting to feel like a real headquarters," he declared, already planning experiments with soil samples he'd collected from around the property. While Lucas worked on his research, Jessica told him she needed to check some equipment in another section and would be back shortly. With electric lanterns now lighting the main corridors, she made her way to the hidden medical room, this time bringing tools to access the locked filing cabinets. The room appeared untouched from her previous visit. Using a small pry bar, Jessica carefully opened the locked cabinet drawers one by one, photographing documents before returning them exactly as she found them. What emerged was a disturbing picture of a classified program that had operated from this location between 1967 and 1978. Project Mindshaper appeared to be a CIA initiative studying methods of behavioral modification, memory manipulation, and cognitive restructuring, using a combination of psychological techniques, experimental drugs, and what several documents called enhanced suggestion protocols. More disturbing were the subject files. Dozens of individuals brought to this facility, often under false pretenses, for procedures they hadn't consented to. Many were described as community influence targets, selected because of their roles in local media, education, or community organizing. One document particularly chilled Jessica, a memorandum discussing integration of Mindshaper techniques into broader domestic surveillance programs and potential for mass application through environmental vectors. The implications were staggering. What had begun as targeted experimentation on individuals was being developed for wider deployment. A technical section described equipment designed to deliver calibrated dosages through municipal water systems and aerosol distribution in contained public spaces. This wasn't just about controlling individuals, but potentially entire communities. As Jessica photographed this evidence of what appeared to be illegal government experimentation on U.S. citizens, her hands trembled with both fear and anger. The program had officially terminated in 1978, following congressional scrutiny of related operations, but several documents suggested that while the physical facility was abandoned, the research continued elsewhere under different classification. The final document she found, dated 1982, was a security assessment of the decommissioned facility, noting that while most sensitive materials had been removed, the backup data storage and certain legacy documentation remained in a secure compartment due to extraction complications and would be retrieved during a planned site remediation that apparently never occurred. A reference to this secure compartment caught Jessica's attention. Access via Sublevel 3, Section 7B, behind Environmental Control Unit. There was more evidence somewhere deeper in the facility, evidence that had been intended for removal, but was abandoned when the site remediation never took place. Jessica carefully returned the documents to their original positions, locked the cabinets as best she could, and returned to the main control room, her mind reeling from what she'd discovered. Lucas looked up from his microscope. "Mom, I found something amazing. The soil here has these tiny metal particles that are different from regular dirt. They're shiny under the microscope." Jessica examined his discovery. Indeed, the soil sample contained unusual metallic fragments. "That's a great observation, scientist. Maybe tomorrow we can collect samples from different areas and compare them." As they prepared dinner on the camp stove, Jessica considered her options. The government clearly knew she had accessed the facility and wanted to retrieve whatever remained of Project Mindshaper before she discovered it. Their urgency suggested the material was still sensitive, despite being decades old. She needed to find the secure compartment mentioned in the documents, the legacy data that had never been retrieved. That would be her insurance policy, her leverage to ensure their safety and perhaps secure their future. After Lucas fell asleep, Jessica used the satellite phone to call Frank, describing what she had found while omitting specific details that might put him at risk. "Not entirely surprised," Frank said after listening. "These remote government facilities often have secrets. Question is, what are you going to do with what you found?" "I'm still figuring that out," Jessica admitted. "But I need to understand what I'm dealing with before I respond to these government contacts." "Smart," Frank agreed. "Information is leverage, but only if you know what you have. Just be careful. These people don't appreciate civilians stumbling into their secret gardens." The next morning, Jessica made a critical decision. They would accelerate their move to the silo, bringing essential belongings from the apartment immediately rather than waiting. Whatever was happening with the government interest, she felt more secure having Lucas with her, rather than returning to an apartment where they could be easily found. They spent the morning setting up a more permanent living arrangement, organizing their sleeping area, establishing a functional kitchen space with the camp stove and supplies, and creating a dedicated school area where Lucas could continue his education while they worked on the facility. "Are we going to tell anyone at my school about our super cool underground house?" Lucas asked as they organized his books. Jessica had already considered this. "For now, I think we'll keep it as our secret. I'll let your teacher know we've moved to a new address, but let's not share details until we're more settled." This answer satisfied Lucas, who was already enjoying the special status of having a secret base that none of his friends knew about. By afternoon, they were ready to explore deeper into the facility. Jessica wanted to locate sub-level 3, section 7B mentioned in the documents, the location of the secure compartment containing the legacy data from Project Mindshaper. "Ready for a real exploration mission?" she asked Lucas, who responded with enthusiastic readiness, equipping himself with his expedition pack, containing his notebook, collection containers for specimens, and a digital camera she'd given him to document their underground home. Together, they descended past the main level they had already explored, following a spiral staircase that led deeper into the earth. Sub-level 2 contained massive empty spaces where missile components had once been housed, along with maintenance. Areas and storage rooms stripped of all but the most mundane equipment. The air grew noticeably cooler as they descended to sub-level 3, a maze of narrower corridors and specialized rooms whose purposes weren't immediately obvious. Jessica consulted the rough map she had drawn based on documents from the hidden room, looking for section 7B. "This place is like a giant underground puzzle," Lucas observed, his flashlight illuminating conduits and pipes running along the ceiling. "I bet not many kids get to explore places like this." "You're probably right about that," Jessica agreed, following the section markers until they reached 7B. "This is it, the area we've been looking for." The environmental control unit mentioned in the documents was immediately apparent, a massive system of ducts, filters and machinery that had once maintained air quality throughout the facility. Behind it, just as described, was an access panel secured with a specialized lock. "What's back there?" Lucas asked, trying to peer through a small gap between the unit and the wall. "I'm not sure," Jessica said, deciding honesty with limited details was the best approach. "But when the military left this place, they might have forgotten some important information. If we find it, it might help us make this place safer and better understand its history." Using tools from their exploration kit, Jessica carefully worked on the access panel. The lock, while sophisticated for its era, yielded to her determined efforts after about 20 minutes of careful manipulation. The panel swung open to reveal a small chamber containing what appeared to be an early computer storage system, magnetic tape reels, documentation binders, and several sealed metal containers marked Classified Mindshaper Archive, Authorized Access Only. Whoa, Lucas whispered. Is this like secret spy stuff? Something like that, Jessica acknowledged, photographing everything before touching it. This is from a very old government project. They were supposed to remove it, but never did. As Jessica carefully examined the materials, the significance of their discovery became clear. This wasn't just documentation, it was the complete data archive of Project Mindshaper, including subject records, procedure protocols, chemical formulations, and detailed results of experiments conducted not just at this facility, but at multiple sites across the country. Most critically, a binder marked Oversight Avoidance Protocols contained explicit instructions for circumventing congressional supervision, concealing budget allocations, and establishing deniable command structures, evidence not just of unethical experimentation, but of deliberate efforts to hide the program from legal oversight. Jessica's hands trembled as she realized what they had found. This wasn't just leverage, it was explosive evidence of illegal government activities conducted against American citizens, evidence that had been hidden for decades. As they carefully documented the contents of the secure compartment, a low mechanical hum suddenly emanated from somewhere above them, a sound that hadn't been present in the previously dormant facility. "Mom, what's that noise?" Lucas asked. Looking up at the ceiling with concern, Jessica listened carefully, recognizing the sound of the facility's long-dormant ventilation system activating. But they hadn't turned it on. "Someone else is here," she whispered, quickly securing the access panel and gathering their exploration gear. "We need to move quietly back to our living area." Jessica grabbed Lucas's hand, pressing a finger to her lips as they quickly gathered their exploration equipment. "Adventure mode," she whispered with forced calm. "We need to move silently like ninjas." This framing instantly transformed Lucas's budding fear into excited compliance as they slipped from the secret archive room. Instead of returning the way they came, Jessica led them through an adjacent maintenance corridor, a narrow passage barely wide enough for an adult, lined with pipes and electrical conduits. Her mental map of the facility, developed through careful study of the old blueprints, was proving invaluable. This service corridor would connect to the emergency escape route on the opposite side of the silo, allowing them to circle back to their living area while avoiding whoever had entered the facility. "Real explorers always know multiple exit routes," she whispered to Lucas, who nodded with wide-eyed concentration, taking his ninja status very seriously. The mechanical hum grew louder as ventilation systems awakened throughout the facility. Someone had accessed the main control systems and was systematically bringing the dormant silo back online, someone who knew exactly how these systems operated. As they navigated the narrow passage, Jessica's mind raced through scenarios and options. The government officials who had been trying to contact her had clearly decided to take matters into their own hands. But there was a silver lining to this crisis. The reactivation of the facility's systems meant the intruders had inadvertently done some of their work for them. If Jessica could access the control room, she could potentially lock down sections of the facility, securing their position. After 10 tense minutes of careful movement through the maintenance corridor, they reached a junction that would take them up to the main level. Jessica paused, listening intently. Voices echoed distantly through the ventilation ducts. At least 2 people, maybe more, somewhere on the main control level. "We need to change plans," she whispered to Lucas. "We're going to use the emergency exit to go outside, then circle around to get our essential supplies." Lucas nodded, absorbing this change with remarkable adaptability. The emergency exit was a feature Jessica had discovered during her blueprint study, a narrow stairwell leading directly to the surface, designed as an escape route if the main entrance was compromised. It emerged approximately 50 yards from the main entrance structure, concealed within what looked like a small storm shelter. The exit hadn't been used in decades, and Jessica worried the door might be rusted shut or the passage blocked. But as they climbed the narrow stairs, the mechanism yielded to her efforts, allowing them to push open a heavy hatch and emerge into the late afternoon sunlight. "Whoa," Lucas whispered as they crawled out, blinking in the sudden brightness. "That was like a secret spy escape." "Exactly right," Jessica agreed, carefully lowering the hatch back into position. "And now we need to be super stealthy as we circle around to see who's visiting our home." Staying low in the prairie grass, they made their way around the perimeter of the property. Near the main entrance, Jessica spotted 2 black SUVs with government plates and tinted windows. 4 men in dark suits were unloading equipment while another stood guard outside the entrance. "Government people," she whispered to Lucas. "They're interested in the old information stored in the silo." "Are they the good guys or bad guys?" Lucas asked with the direct clarity of childhood. Jessica considered how to answer. "They're people doing their job, but they're entering our home without permission, which isn't okay. And I think they want to take things that might help us understand the history of our silo." This balanced response seemed to satisfy Lucas, who was processing this adventure through the lens of the books he loved, where right and wrong were often more complicated than they first appeared. "What's our mission now?" he asked, fully engaged in their covert operation. Jessica thought quickly. "First, we need to get to Frank's truck without being seen. It has our satellite phone and some supplies we might need." Frank's truck was parked behind a small stand of trees where they had left it earlier, thankfully out of sight from the main entrance. They made their way there by staying in the tall grass, moving slowly to avoid detection. Once safely inside the truck, Jessica used the satellite phone to call Frank. "We have visitors," she explained tersely. "Government types bringing systems online and searching the facility." "Are you safe?" Frank asked immediately. "For now. We're in your truck out of sight, but they're in our home, and we need a secure place to regroup while I figure out next steps." Frank didn't hesitate. "My property is yours if you need it. I have a workshop cabin that's private and self-contained, and I might have some information that could help you understand what you're dealing with." Jessica agreed to meet him at a designated location away from town, where he would lead them to his property via back roads. As they drove away from the silo, she watched the government vehicles disappear in the rearview mirror with mixed emotions. The silo was supposed to be their solution to housing insecurity, their forever home that no one could take from them. Instead, it had thrust them into a dangerous game, involving classified government secrets and powerful agencies that operated in shadows. Yet despite these complications, Jessica felt a strange new energy coursing through her. For months, years really, she had been reacting to circumstances beyond her control: the economic downturn that led to her layoff, the housing market that excluded single parents, the eviction notice that threatened their stability. Now, with the discovery of Project Mindshaper, she held something valuable, something that gave her leverage against forces that had seemed insurmountable. "Mom, are we still going to live in the silo?" Lucas asked as they drove through the countryside, the setting sun painting the prairie in gold and amber. "Absolutely," Jessica said with newfound determination. "That's our home now. We just need to sort out a few things with these government people first." Lucas nodded, accepting this with the remarkable resilience he'd shown throughout their housing challenges. "I think we should make them understand that they can't just take people's homes, even if they're from the government." Jessica smiled at his simple wisdom. "That's exactly what we're going to do, buddy." Frank's property was a secluded 20-acre parcel with several outbuildings scattered among pine trees. The workshop cabin he had offered was a charming structure. Built from reclaimed materials, a timber frame with large windows, a small kitchen, bathroom and sleeping loft. Solar panels on the roof connected to a battery system, making it entirely off-grid. "It's not fancy, but it's secure and comfortable," Frank explained as he showed them around. "No one comes out here without me knowing about it." Once Lucas was settled with his books and a hot meal, Frank and Jessica sat at the rough-hewn table to discuss their situation. "Before we go further, there's something you should know," Frank said, his expression serious. "My interest in your silo purchase wasn't entirely random. I've been watching those government property auctions for years, particularly the old military sites." Jessica studied him with new awareness. "You knew something about the silo before I bought it?" Frank nodded. "Not specifics, but rumors. I worked construction for 50 years, including government contracts in the 60s and 70s. You hear things on those jobs, whispers about facilities being repurposed after their official closure, unusual equipment being installed in supposedly decommissioned sites." He poured them both coffee before continuing. "When certain properties come up for auction, there's often unusual interest from government types. Not public bidding, but people watching who buys these places. Your silo was one of those properties." "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Jessica asked, not accusatory but genuinely curious. "Would you have believed me, a stranger warning you about government conspiracies at an auction?" Frank smiled. "Riley. Besides, I wanted to see if you'd find anything yourself. Confirmation, you might say, that the rumors had substance." Jessica considered this, then shared what she had discovered about Project Mindshaper, the hidden medical facility, the documentation of unauthorized human experimentation, and the secure archive they had located just before the government agents arrived. Frank listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly troubled. When she finished, he sighed deeply. "This is bigger than I imagined. These weren't just rumors, they were shadows of something very real and very dark." "The question is, what do I do now?" Jessica asked. "They've essentially invaded my property. I have documentation of illegal government activities from decades ago, and I still need a home for my son." Frank thought for a moment. "Information is power, but only if used strategically. Those agents at your silo, they're just following orders, retrieving old secrets before they become public. The real leverage isn't with them, but with whoever authorized this program in the first place, people who never expected these records to surface. So, I need to reach higher," Jessica realized, "above the cleanup crew to the people who would be most damaged by this information becoming public." "Exactly, but carefully. These are powerful forces that don't appreciate exposure." Frank hesitated. "I may know someone who could help. A journalist I worked with years ago on a story about government contract irregularities. She specializes in national security reporting and has the connections to verify this kind of information." "Is she trustworthy?" Jessica asked, thinking of Lucas sleeping peacefully in the loft above them. "As much as anyone can be in that world. More importantly, she knows how to protect sources and navigate these waters safely." Frank checked his watch. "It's late now, but I'll contact her in the morning if you'd like." Jessica agreed, and they spent another hour developing a strategy. Rather than directly confronting the government agents or reporting the trespass to local authorities who would be out of their depth, they would document everything while establishing insurance through selective sharing of information with trusted parties. That night, as Lucas slept soundly in the cabin's loft, Jessica sat by the window, reviewing the photographs she had taken of the Project Mindshaper documents. The clinical language describing American citizens as subjects still chilled her, but she was beginning to see beyond her initial fear to the strategic value of what she had discovered. This wasn't just about securing their home anymore. It was about accountability for actions hidden from public view for decades. It was about ensuring that government agencies operated within legal and ethical boundaries. And personally, it was about transforming a desperate housing solution into an opportunity to secure their future on their own terms. Morning brought renewed purpose. While Lucas explored the workshop with Frank, learning how to use basic tools and helping with small projects, Jessica prepared to meet Frank's journalist contact, Elena Rivera, who had immediately agreed to drive out after hearing a carefully worded explanation of what they had discovered. Elena arrived shortly before noon, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with the focused intensity of someone who had spent decades separating truth from deception. "Frank says you found something significant," she said after introductions, wasting no time on small talk. Jessica showed her selected photographs of the Project Mind Shaper documents, watching as Elena's professional composure momentarily faltered. "This is..." Elena paused, searching for words. "This appears to be documentation of operations that were specifically denied during congressional hearings in the late 70s. If authentic, it's extraordinarily significant." "It's authentic," Jessica confirmed. "And there's more, a complete data archive that was supposed to be removed during site remediation, but was abandoned. The government agents who entered my property yesterday are likely retrieving it now." Elena's journalistic instincts visibly engaged. "You have photographs of this archive?" "Yes, and I've created secure backups stored in multiple locations." This wasn't entirely true yet, but it would be by day's end. Another item on Jessica's strategic plan. For the next hour, they discussed the implications of the discovery and how best to use it. Elena explained that while the statute of limitations had expired for most potential crimes documented in the files, the political ramifications remained significant, particularly given ongoing debates about government surveillance and intelligence agency oversight. "The agencies involved would prefer this history remain buried," Elena explained. "Not just to protect individuals who might still be alive, but because these programs share methodological DNA with current operations. Exposure creates both legal vulnerability and operational complications." "So I have legitimate leverage," Jessica concluded. "Yes, but it's like holding a live wire, dangerous if mishandled." Elena studied her with professional assessment. "What exactly do you want from this situation?" Jessica had been contemplating this question all night. "First, I want undisturbed ownership of the property I legally purchased. Second, I want assistance bringing it up to code as a residential space, the resources to make it a proper home for my son. And third, I want assurance of our safety and privacy going forward." Elena nodded slowly. "Reasonable demands, focused on your personal situation rather than broader exposure or financial gain. That increases your chances of success." She thought for a moment. "I have contacts who can facilitate communication with the appropriate decision-makers, people above the pay grade of the agents currently at your property. With your permission, I'll reach out while keeping your identity protected initially." Jessica agreed, and they developed a communication protocol that would maintain her safety throughout the negotiation process. Elena would serve as an intermediary, using her journalistic credentials and reputation as a shield while they established terms. Before leaving, Elena offered one final piece of advice. Document everything happening at your property. Set up remote cameras if possible. The more evidence you have of their unauthorized presence and activities, the stronger your position. After Eleanor's departure, Jessica, Frank, and Lucas returned to the silo property, parking at a distance that allowed them to observe without being detected. Using high-powered binoculars borrowed from Frank, they watched as additional government personnel arrived, technical specialists based on the equipment they unloaded. "They're doing a complete sweep and extraction," Frank observed. "Probably. Planning to remove all evidence this place was ever used for anything other than missile launch capabilities." Jessica felt a surprising possessiveness watching these strangers freely entering and exiting her home. "They have no right to be there. I have the deed, I paid for this property, and they're trespassing." "True in the legal sense," Frank agreed. "But these folks operate by different rules when national security is invoked. That's why Elena's approach is smart. Go over their heads to people who can make decisions based on risk calculation rather than operational protocols." While they observed, Jessica implemented another part of her strategy, using Frank's tools and Lucas's eager assistance. They installed several well-concealed trail cameras around the property perimeter, the kind hunters use to track wildlife, motion-activated and capable of capturing time-stamped images and video. "It's like we're setting traps for spies," Lucas whispered excitedly as they positioned the final camera. "Information traps," Jessica corrected with a smile. "We're just documenting who comes and goes from our home while we're temporarily away." By evening, they had established comprehensive surveillance of their property and returned to Frank's cabin to await initial contact from Elena. The journalist called shortly after dinner, her voice tense with controlled excitement. "Your information created quite a stir in certain circles," she reported. "I've been contacted by someone who identifies themselves as authorized to resolve the situation discreetly. They've requested a meeting tomorrow to discuss terms." "That was fast," Jessica noted, both encouraged and concerned by the rapid response. "When you have the right leverage, things can move quickly in Washington," Elena explained. "The meeting will be in a public location of our choosing, with appropriate security measures in place. They're sending a senior representative, not the key field agents, at your property." Jessica felt a momentary vertigo at how rapidly events were unfolding. Just days ago, she had been a desperate mother facing eviction with less than $300 to her name. Now she was negotiating with government agencies over classified Cold War experiments while living in a borrowed cabin in the woods. Yet amid this surreal situation, she felt an unfamiliar sensation taking root: empowerment. For perhaps the first time since becoming a single mother, circumstances weren't simply happening to her. She was actively shaping them, leveraging unexpected discovery into opportunity. That night, after Lucas had fallen asleep following their now-established ritual of reading by lantern light, Jessica sat on the cabin's small porch, watching stars emerge in the clear country sky. Frank joined her, offering a mug of tea. "You know what impresses me most about all this," he said after they had sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. "You never once considered just walking away from the silo. Most people would have run at the first sign of government interest, written off their investment, and looked for safer options." Jessica considered this. "It never occurred to me to abandon it. Maybe because walking away has never been a luxury I could afford as a parent. You adapt, you problem-solve, you find a way forward." "That's rare courage," Frank observed. "The kind that doesn't make a show of itself, but just quietly does what needs doing." "It's not courage," Jessica corrected him. "It's necessity. Lucas deserves stability, a place that's ours, that no one can take away with 2 weeks' notice. The silo was our chance at that before all this craziness, and it still is." Frank nodded appreciatively. "Necessity or not, you've handled this situation with remarkable composure and strategic thinking. Not everyone responds to crisis by rising to meet it." His words settled something in Jessica's mind. This bizarre situation with classified experiments and government agents wasn't a detour from their goal of finding permanent housing. It was, potentially, the accelerated path to achieving it, if handled correctly. The meeting with the government representative was arranged for the following day at a busy public library in a neighboring county, neutral territory suggested by Elena. Jessica would attend with both Elena and Frank present as witnesses and support, while Lucas would remain safely at the cabin with Frank's neighbor, a retired teacher who had readily agreed to help. That morning, Jessica prepared carefully, reviewing her documentation and clarifying her objectives. She dressed in her most professional outfit, the one she had worn to job interviews before the layoff, and studied the photographs from their property surveillance cameras, which showed increased activity overnight as additional personnel and equipment arrived at the silo. "Remember," Elena advised as they drove to the meeting, "they want to resolve this quietly above all else. Exposure is their greatest concern. Your reasonable demands for personal housing security are actually giving them an easy out compared to public disclosure." The government representative was waiting in a private study room when they arrived, a composed woman in her 60s. With silver hair and the poised confidence of someone accustomed to managing sensitive situations. She introduced herself simply as Ms. Winters, offering no agency affiliation or title. "Thank you for agreeing to this discussion," she began after they were seated. "I understand you've encountered some materials of historical sensitivity during renovation of your recently acquired property." The deliberate understatement almost made Jessica smile. That's one way to describe finding evidence of illegal human experimentation conducted on American citizens without their knowledge or consent, she replied evenly. Ms. Winters didn't flinch. Historical programs from different eras operated under different oversight parameters. Context is important in evaluating past operations. The documents I found specifically detail measures taken to avoid congressional oversight and legal scrutiny, Jessica countered. That suggests awareness, that these parameters were being violated even by the standards of the time. A flicker of recognition crossed Ms. Winters' face, confirmation that Jessica had indeed accessed and understood the most damaging aspects of the files. "What are you seeking from this situation, Ms. Morgan?" she asked directly, changing tack. Jessica laid out her terms clearly. Uncontested ownership of the property, with formal documentation preventing any future government claims. Financial and technical assistance converting the facility to safe residential use. And binding assurances of privacy and safety for herself and her son going forward. "In exchange," she concluded, "I'm prepared to surrender all original documentation, bound at the site, and maintain complete confidentiality about specific program details, provided the core historical facts are acknowledged in an appropriate forum." Ms. Winters listened without interruption, her expression revealing nothing. When Jessica finished, she asked, "Appropriate forum?" "A sealed congressional briefing to the Intelligence Oversight Committee," Elena interjected. "Establishing historical record without public disclosure, but ensuring accountability and preventing similar programs in the future." Ms. Winters nodded slowly. "Your terms are more reasonable than they might have been. That's appreciated." She paused, considering. "I'll need to consult with principals, but I believe we can reach an accommodation along these lines." The meeting concluded with an agreement to reconnect the following day after Ms. Winters had conferred with her superiors. As they left the library, Frank gave Jessica's shoulder a supportive squeeze. "You handled that perfectly, professional, focused on solutions rather than recriminations. She'll recommend accepting your terms." Elena agreed. "You didn't overplay your hand or make demands that would force them to consider more drastic alternatives." "Smart negotiating," Jessica felt a cautious optimism growing. For the first time since discovering the hidden room, she could envision a path forward that secured their home without ongoing government interference, a resolution that addressed both the practical needs of her family and the ethical implications of what she had discovered. That afternoon, checking the surveillance cameras remotely through Frank's satellite internet connection, they observed increased activity at the silo facility, but notably different in nature. Rather than removing materials, the personnel appeared to be conducting environmental testing and structural assessments. "Looks like they're already preparing for the possibility of residential conversion," Frank observed as they reviewed the footage. "That's a good sign. They're taking your terms seriously." Lucas returned from his day with Frank's neighbor full of stories about the greenhouse they had visited and the seedlings he had helped plant. His resilience throughout this upheaval continued to amaze Jessica, reinforcing her determination to secure not just housing, but a home where he could flourish. "Did you win our house back from the government people?" he asked with characteristic directness as they prepared dinner together. Jessica considered how to explain the complex situation. "We're working on an agreement. They're interested in the old information we found, and we're interested in making the silo a proper home. I think we're going to find a solution that works for everyone." Lucas nodded, accepting this framework. "They can have the old stuff as long as we get to keep our underground science base. That seems fair." His simple assessment made Jessica smile. Sometimes adult complications could indeed be reduced to such straightforward exchanges. They just became layered with history, ego, and bureaucracy that obscured the essential fairness at their core. That evening, Eleanor called with unexpected news. "They've expedited their decision process. Ms. Winters wants to meet again tomorrow morning to formalize terms. They're preparing documents already." The rapid response suggested Jessica had even more leverage than she'd realized, or that the materials were even more sensitive than they appeared. Either way, it validated her approach and strengthened her position, heading into final negotiations. As she prepared for bed that night, Jessica found herself filled with a quiet confidence that had been absent for months. The desperate gamble of purchasing an abandoned missile silo had transformed into an unexpected opportunity, not just for housing security, but for a kind of justice, accountability for historical wrongs, and protection against future ones. More personally, she had discovered reserves of strategic thinking and negotiation skills she hadn't known she possessed. The environmental engineer, who had been professionally sidelined by economic forces beyond her control, was now successfully navigating a high-stakes negotiation with government agencies, advocating effectively for herself and her son. Whatever the outcome of tomorrow's meeting, Jessica knew something fundamental had shifted within her. The woman who would walk into those negotiations was not the same one who had stood trembling in her kitchen 2 weeks ago, holding an eviction notice and seeing no way forward. Crisis had revealed capacity, necessity had forged new strength, and a mother's determination to provide stability for her child had become a force capable of moving even the most entrenched systems when aligned with truth and justice. The morning of the final negotiation dawned clear and bright, as if the universe itself approved of the path Jessica had chosen. She dressed with deliberate care, professional but not formal, a visual reminder that she approached this meeting as an equal participant, not a supplicant. "You look like a superhero disguised as a regular person," Lucas observed as she braided her hair. His perception often cut straight to emotional truths, adults obscured with complexity. "That might be the nicest compliment I've ever received," Jessica replied, kneeling to his level. "And you know what? You're my superhero inspiration. The way you've handled all these changes and challenges shows me how brave people can really be." Lucas beamed with pride, then grew serious. "Mom, even if the government people try to trick us, we're still keeping our silo home, right?" "Absolutely," Jessica affirmed. "That's non-negotiable. The silo is ours now and forever." This simple promise, housing security that couldn't be revoked by landlords or market forces, had been their North Star throughout this extraordinary journey. Whatever else emerged from today's meeting, that fundamental objective would not be compromised. Frank and Elena arrived to drive Jessica to the meeting, both offering last-minute advice that she absorbed with calm focus. They had prepared thoroughly, anticipating various scenarios and responses. Jessica carried both physical and digital evidence of Project Mindshaper, strategically distributed among multiple secure locations as insurance against any attempt to resolve the situation by simply seizing all documentation. The meeting location had changed from the public library to a small federal building in the nearest city, a sign that higher-level officials might be participating. As they passed through security, Jessica noted the subtle but heightened protocols: additional officers, more thorough ID checks, and escorts who materialized to guide them to a conference room on the top floor. Ms. Winters awaited them, accompanied by two individuals who were introduced only by name, with no titles or affiliations offered. The conference table held leather portfolios at each place setting, the government seal embossed on their covers. "Thank you for accommodating the change in venue," Ms. Winters began once they were seated. "We've prepared a comprehensive agreement, addressing the terms you outlined yesterday. Before we review the specifics, my colleagues have a few preliminary matters to address." One of the unnamed officials, a man in his 50s with the precise diction of someone accustomed to testimony, leaned forward. "Ms. Morgan, we want to acknowledge that your handling of this situation has been exemplary. You've approached a highly sensitive matter with discretion and reasonableness that we don't often encounter." This unexpected recognition caught Jessica off guard. She had anticipated resistance, perhaps veiled threats, or attempts to minimize the significance of her discovery. "The materials you located at the Atlas F facility," he continued, "document a program that operated outside established oversight parameters, even for its era. While historical context is important, we recognize that Project Mindshaper represented an overreach that would not be sanctioned under any legitimate national security framework, past or present." The second official, an older woman with the weathered composure of someone who had navigated decades of classified operations, added, "Your request for acknowledgement through appropriate channels rather than public exposure demonstrates a balanced understanding of both accountability and security considerations. This has allowed us to develop a resolution that addresses legitimate concerns while protecting sensitive operational methodologies." Jessica exchanged glances with Elena, whose subtle nod confirmed this was an unusually forthright acknowledgement from agencies typically reluctant to admit historical misconduct. "Let's review the proposed agreement," Ms. Winters suggested. Opening her portfolio, what followed was remarkably straightforward. The government offered clear title to the entire Atlas F facility and surrounding acreage, with explicit waivers preventing any future claims based on historical use or national security considerations. This was accompanied by a substantial grant for environmental remediation and conversion to residential use, structured as a research project on sustainable repurposing of decommissioned military installations, providing both funding and plausible public explanation for government involvement. Additional provisions included comprehensive environmental testing and hazard abatement, technical assistance from specialists in underground construction and systems, and educational opportunities for Lucas through advanced STEM programs typically reserved for children of government employees. In exchange, Jessica would surrender all original documentation discovered at the site, maintain confidentiality regarding specific operational details of Project Mindshaper, and agree to security. Reviews of any planned major structural modifications to the deeper levels of the facility. Most significantly, the agreement included provisions for a classified briefing to the Senate Intelligence Oversight Committee, documenting the historical program while establishing enhanced safeguards against similar operations in the future. The committee briefing is particularly important, Elena noted, reviewing that section carefully. This creates a legal record without public disclosure, ensuring both historical accountability and future prevention. Jessica studied each provision methodically, asking clarifying questions and requesting specific language adjustments where terms seemed ambiguous. Throughout this process, she maintained the quiet confidence that had emerged during her preparation, neither intimidated by the setting nor overly eager to conclude. "There's one additional matter not addressed here," she said after they had reviewed the entire document. "The agents currently occupying my property entered without permission and have been conducting operations there for days. I want formal acknowledgement that this constituted unauthorized access, with assurance it won't be repeated." The officials exchanged glances before Ms. Winters responded. "We can include language recognizing that initial entry occurred without owner consultation and establishing protocols requiring explicit permission for any future access." This careful phrasing, avoiding terms like trespassing or illegal entry while still acknowledging the impropriety, reflected the delicate balance being struck. Jessica accepted it as sufficient. After a final review by Elena, who had experience with government agreements, Jessica signed the documents. The officials added their signatures, followed by 2 additional signatories who entered specifically for this purpose, suggesting higher authorization than the room's occupants could provide. "Congratulations, Ms. Morgan," Ms. Winters said as they concluded. "You now have uncontested ownership of a rather unique property with substantial resources for its development. Our technical team will coordinate with you on implementation timelines for the remediation and conversion assistance." As they gathered their materials to leave, the older female official approached Jessica privately. "Off the record," she said quietly, "what you found represents a period in our institutional history that many of us have worked to ensure never repeats. Your handling of this situation may have done more to strengthen those internal safeguards than you realize." This glimpse of the human dimension behind governmental facades, the suggestion that within even the most opaque agencies, individuals worked to uphold ethical boundaries, was perhaps the most unexpected outcome of the morning's proceedings. Outside the building, Frank embraced Jessica with fatherly pride. "You did it. You actually negotiated successfully with agencies that make hardened politicians tremble." Elena's assessment was more measured but equally affirming. "This is one of the most favorable outcomes I've seen in cases involving classified historical programs. They're giving you essentially everything you asked for, with minimal restrictions that protect their core security concerns." Jessica felt a complex mix of emotions as they drove away: relief that the negotiation had succeeded, pride in her effective advocacy, and an emerging excitement about the possibilities that now lay before them. The desperate housing solution that had led her to purchase an abandoned missile silo had transformed into an opportunity beyond anything she could have imagined 2 weeks earlier. "Let's go tell Lucas we've officially secured our forever home," she said, her voice steady with the certainty of genuine victory. When they returned to Frank's cabin, Lucas was helping Frank's neighbor tend the garden, his hands dirty and his face alight with the simple joy of nurturing growing things. Seeing Jessica, he ran to her with eager curiosity. "Did we win?" he asked directly. Jessica knelt to his level, meeting his eyes. "We did. The silo is officially, permanently ours. And we're getting help to make it an amazing home. Electricity, water, everything we need." Lucas's face split into a magnificent grin. "I knew you could do it. You're the best negotiator ever." His complete faith in her abilities, a faith she hadn't fully shared until now, filled Jessica with a profound gratitude. Throughout the upheaval of job loss, eviction, and this extraordinary discovery, Lucas had never doubted that his mother would find a way forward. His confidence had been a foundation she could build upon, even when her own wavered. That afternoon, they drove to the silo property, now legally and indisputably theirs. The government vehicles were gone, the entrance unsealed. A single representative waited to provide access codes for the security systems that had been installed, part of the negotiated agreement that balanced Jessica's ownership rights with security considerations for the sensitive historical use. "A technical team will contact you tomorrow to begin environmental assessment and remediation planning," the representative explained, handing over a comprehensive folder of documentation. "All systems have been restored to operational status, including water, power, and ventilation. The facility is currently habitable, though we recommend completing safety upgrades before permanent occupation." As the representative departed, Jessica and Lucas stood at the entrance to their extraordinary new home, the magnitude of what they had accomplished finally sinking in. "Let's go see our place," Lucas said, reaching for Jessica's hand. "I bet they fixed a bunch of stuff while they were taking the secret things." Indeed, as they descended into the facility, the transformation was remarkable. The dormant systems Jessica had hoped to gradually restore over months were now fully operational. Lights illuminated corridors that had been navigated by flashlight just days earlier. Fresh air circulated through ventilation systems silent for decades before their discovery. The main control level, which they had begun converting to living space, had been meticulously cleaned and organized. Their belongings remained untouched, but had been carefully arranged to accommodate the system's restoration work. Most surprisingly, the crew quarters they had used as their initial sleeping area had been upgraded with proper beds, linens, and basic furnishings, immediate habitability that exceeded anything Jessica could have created with her limited resources. "They really want us to be comfortable here," Frank observed, examining the high-quality work with professional appreciation. "It's more than that," Elena suggested. "They're demonstrating good faith implementation of the agreement, establishing a cooperative relationship rather than an adversarial one." Lucas explored with boundless enthusiasm, discovering improvements in every area they had begun to adapt. The kitchen space now had functional appliances. The bathroom facilities were fully operational, and the security systems provided both protection and communication capabilities they hadn't imagined possible on their budget. "Mom, they put in a real science lab," he called from what had been a storage room they designated as his future project space. The room now contained basic but high-quality scientific equipment, microscopes, testing kits, and educational materials appropriate for his age, but sophisticated enough to challenge his curious mind. As they continued exploring, Jessica noted that while the main living areas had been enhanced, the deeper levels, particularly the areas containing evidence of Project Mindshaper, had been meticulously cleaned and sealed. The hidden medical room was now empty, its contents removed as agreed in the negotiation. The secure compartment in sub-level 3 had similarly been cleared, though the space itself remained accessible. "They've honored both the letter and spirit of the agreement," Elena noted as they completed their inspection, "removing sensitive materials, while preserving your ownership and use rights to the entire facility." That evening, they celebrated with an impromptu housewarming dinner in their newly functional kitchen. Frank had brought supplies, and Lucas insisted on making place cards for everyone, officially designating the meal as first feast in the science home. As they ate, conversation turned naturally to future plans. The government funding would allow for comprehensive renovation far beyond what Jessica had initially imagined possible. Proper insulation, advanced energy systems, customized living, spaces tailored to their needs rather than adapted from military infrastructure. I'm thinking of incorporating sustainable design principles throughout, Jessica explained, her environmental engineering background emerging with renewed purpose. Passive solar where possible, water reclamation systems, geothermal heating, using the natural underground temperature regulation. You could make this a model for repurposing military installations, Elena suggested. There are hundreds of these facilities across the country, most sitting abandoned or underutilized. That's actually written into the agreement, Jessica confirmed. The funding is structured as a research project on sustainable conversion, with documentation of methods and outcomes. Its smart framing gives them justification for the resources they're providing while creating genuine public benefit. Lucas, listening intently to the adult conversation, added his own vision. We should make a big greenhouse on top where we grow our own food, and maybe solar panels that look like trees. And definitely a science museum part where kids can learn about underground houses and saving energy. His natural integration of scientific interest, environmental consciousness, and community education reflected values Jessica had quietly modeled throughout his life, values now finding expression in this unprecedented opportunity. As evening deepened and Lucas began to fade, Jessica prepared their crew quarters for their first night as official, uncontested residents. The government team had installed proper beds, but Lucas insisted they still use their sleeping bags for adventure continuity. After tucking him in and returning to the main control room where Frank and Elena were preparing to leave, Jessica experienced a moment of profound realization. Standing in this improbable space, a Cold War relic transformed into the beginning of a sustainable home, she recognized how completely her perspective had shifted in just 2 weeks. When I bought this place, I saw it as a desperate last resort, she told her friends quietly. Just a way to avoid homelessness when every conventional option had failed us. I never imagined that your desperate solution would become something visionary, Frank suggested when she trailed off. Or that you'd end up with more security and resources than conventional housing could ever have provided, Elena added. Jessica nodded, still processing the extraordinary reversal. 2 weeks ago, I had $300 to my name and an eviction notice. Now we have a mortgage-free home, funding for comprehensive renovation, and educational opportunities for Lucas that I couldn't have provided in a traditional setting. Plus, you've established a precedent for government accountability that might help prevent future abuses, Elena noted. That's no small thing. Frank, who had witnessed Jessica's journey from the auction through the final negotiation, offered a perspective that captured something essential about her transformation. You know what made this possible? Not just luck or even leverage from what you discovered. It was your refusal to be defined by circumstances, he elaborated as Jessica listened thoughtfully. When life handed you an impossible situation, unaffordable housing, impending eviction, limited resources, you expanded your definition of possible solutions to include an abandoned missile silo. When that silo revealed dangerous secrets, you didn't flee or panic, but developed a strategic response. At every stage, you refused the limitations others might have accepted. This framing resonated deeply with Jessica. Throughout her adult life, she had often felt constrained by circumstances beyond her control: financial pressures, the challenges of single parenthood, the economic vulnerabilities that made conventional stability seem increasingly unattainable. Yet in this crisis, she had somehow transcended those constraints, finding creative solutions and personal strength she hadn't realized she possessed. After Frank and Elena departed, promising to return the following day to help plan the renovation, Jessica sat alone in the control room, now illuminated by proper lighting rather than the camping lanterns they had initially relied upon. Vicky's space hummed with operational systems, tangible evidence of the transformation underway. She opened her laptop to begin documenting ideas for the sustainable conversion, a project that would now merge her professional expertise with their personal needs. As an environmental engineer, she had designed systems for others, often corporate, clients whose priorities didn't always align with optimal sustainability. Now she could create an integrated living space embodying the principles she valued most: resource efficiency, minimal environmental impact, and regenerative design that improved rather than depleted the surrounding ecosystem. The irony wasn't lost on her that a facility originally built to house weapons of unimaginable destruction would now become a model of sustainability and life-affirming design. The concrete and steel constructed for war would be repurposed for nurturing growth, Lucas's development, their family stability, and potentially a broader demonstration of how military infrastructure could be transformed for peaceful, constructive purposes. Beyond the practical aspects of their situation, Jessica recognized that this journey had fundamentally altered her self-perception. The woman who had stood paralyzed before an eviction notice just 2 weeks earlier now saw herself as capable of navigating extraordinary challenges, advocating effectively for herself and her son, and transforming crisis into opportunity through a combination of courage, strategic thinking, and principled negotiation. This evolved self-image might prove the most valuable outcome of their unusual adventure, more enduring than the physical security of their new home or even the financial resources now available for its development. Jessica had discovered capacities within herself that would remain accessible regardless of future challenges, a confidence grounded not in circumstance, but in proven ability to shape circumstances rather than merely respond to them. The following morning, Lucas woke earlier than usual, energized by their official homecoming. "Can we start planning my science room today?" he asked before Jessica had even prepared breakfast in their newly functional kitchen. "Absolutely," she agreed. "We should map out the whole renovation plan, what spaces we want to develop first, how everything will connect, what special features we want to include." "I already made some drawings," Lucas announced, retrieving his notebook. He had sketched detailed plans for various areas, including a remarkable design for his bedroom that incorporated elements of both laboratory and observatory, with space for his growing collection of scientific equipment and books. "These are amazing," Jessica said, genuinely impressed by his thoughtful layouts. "We should definitely incorporate your ideas into the official plans." As they enjoyed breakfast in their underground home, now comfortably heated and ventilated, thanks to the restored systems, Jessica shared her emerging vision for the property's development. "I'm thinking we should develop the surface building into a proper entrance and social space, somewhere that feels welcoming rather than forbidding, maybe with large windows and growing areas to connect us to the above-ground environment." Lucas nodded enthusiastically. "And we could build a glass dome for stargazing that connects to my bedroom level through a special staircase." "That's actually not impossible with the resources we now have," Jessica realized, the scope of possibilities expanding with each conversation. The technical assistance provided in our agreement includes architectural support for custom adaptations. Their morning planning session was interrupted by a call from Elena, who had been contacted by several of her journalistic colleagues following discreet inquiries about the negotiated agreement. "Nothing has leaked about Project Mindshaper specifically," she assured Jessica, "but there's growing interest in the unusual transfer of resources for a private missile silo conversion. Several sustainable design publications want to interview you about the concept of repurposing military infrastructure for ecological housing." This unexpected attention presented both opportunity and complication. The agreement restricted discussion of the facility's classified historical use, but placed no limitations on sharing the sustainable conversion process. In fact, documentation and dissemination of methods were explicitly encouraged as part of the research project framing. "This could be valuable visibility for your environmental engineering expertise," Elena suggested. "A potential pathway back to professional practice, but on your own terms rather than through traditional employment." Jessica hadn't considered this dimension, how their unusual housing solution might reconnect her to professional opportunities that had seemed lost after her layoff. The thought of sharing their sustainable conversion methods, perhaps consulting on similar projects or writing about the experience, opened yet another avenue of possibility emerging from what had begun as desperate necessity. By midday, the technical team promised in their agreement arrived, a diverse group of specialists in environmental remediation, underground construction, sustainable systems, and historical preservation. Their team leader, Dr. Alicia Patel, explained their approach. "We'll conduct comprehensive environmental testing first, identifying any residual concerns from either the military use or subsequent activities. Once we've established a complete baseline, we'll develop a phased renovation plan incorporating both safety requirements and your design priorities." The team's expertise and resources far exceeded anything Jessica could have accessed independently, transforming what would have been years of gradual, budget-constrained adaptation into a coordinated, professional conversion with the potential for genuine innovation. "We're particularly interested in your ideas for passive systems, utilizing the natural properties of the underground structure," Dr. Patel noted after reviewing Jessica's preliminary concepts. "There's growing interest in subsurface architecture as a response to climate challenges, but few opportunities to implement and test approaches at this scale." As the technical team began their initial assessment, Jessica received another unexpected call, this time from Frank, who had been contacted by the County Economic Development Office. "They've heard about the sustainable conversion project through government channels," he explained. "They're interested in discussing zoning adjustments that would allow educational components on the property, specifically workshop programs on sustainable design and technology for local students." This potential for community integration and educational outreach aligned perfectly with Lucas's vision of sharing their science home with other children. What had begun as a private housing solution was evolving toward a multifaceted project, with potential benefits extending far beyond their immediate needs. By late afternoon, as Jessica and Lucas observed the technical team's methodical evaluation of different facility areas, the scope of their transformation came into sharp focus. This wasn't merely adaptation to circumstances, but the creation of something genuinely new, a model for sustainable living that challenged conventional assumptions about both housing and repurposed infrastructure. That evening, as they sat together in their increasingly comfortable underground home, Lucas asked a question that captured the extraordinary nature of their journey. "Mom, do you think anyone else has ever solved not having a house by buying a missile silo and finding secret government stuff inside?" Jessica laughed, the absurdity of their situation striking her anew. "I'm pretty sure we're the first, buddy." "That makes us pioneers," Lucas declared with satisfaction, "like in my history books, but for underground science houses instead of new territories." His framing was remarkably apt. They were indeed pioneers, venturing beyond conventional boundaries of both housing and imagination to create a new model of what home could mean in an era of environmental challenges and economic uncertainties. As Lucas settled into sleep that night, Jessica stood at the entrance to their underground domain, looking up at stars visible through the open hatch. The contrast between the vast sky above and the concrete structure below embodied the paradoxical journey they had undertaken, from confinement by economic circumstance to expansive possibility, from desperate scrambling for basic shelter to pioneering innovation in sustainable living. The path forward would hold challenges of adaptation and integration, technical hurdles and design decisions, but the fundamental victory had been secured, not just a stable home for her son, but a transformative opportunity born from crisis, a reimagining of possibility that would shape not only their physical environment, but their understanding of how adversity could become the catalyst for unprecedented growth. What had begun with an eviction notice and $300 in savings had evolved into a visionary project with potential implications for military site repurposing, sustainable design, community education, and personal reinvention. Jessica Morgan, once defined primarily by economic vulnerability and housing insecurity, now stood at the threshold of creating something that might inspire others to see beyond conventional limitations, to recognize that sometimes the most unpromising beginnings could lead to the most remarkable destinations. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.